Welcome to this presentation from InDex Pharmaceuticals. We will make an introduction to the company. My name is Henrik Ekman. I'm equity analyst here at HC Andersen Capital. And with me today, I have CEO from InDex Pharmaceuticals, Peter Sahuni, who will take us through an introduction slide presentation of the company. As always, we will try and keep the format informal. Feel free to use the chat room to ask any questions, and I will do my best to forward them to Peter. But we have I know Peter have prepared this presentation, and when he's done, we will start the Q&A unless there's something that we will ask as he go along. So with that, Peter, a very warm welcome to you. We're very happy to have this opportunity to make this introduction to your company. So take us through what it's all about.
Absolutely. So thank you very much for the opportunity to present here today. So my name is Peter Sahuni. I'm the CEO of InDex Pharmaceuticals since 2015. So I'll be walking you through what we're about. Yes, we always start with our standard forward-looking statement. InDex is a biotech company developing a drug for ulcerative colitis to be able to help patients like Felicia here suffering from this debilitating disease and help them live a normal life. So that's really what it's about. But I can expand a bit on that maybe. So our lead drug candidate is called Cobitolimod that we are developing for ulcerative colitis, and we're now advancing into phase 3, which is the last stage of development before you can apply for marketing approval. Apart from Cobitolimod, we have a broad portfolio of chemically similar substances. We call them DIMS, DNA-based immunomodulatory sequences, that we can use to steer the immune system in immunological diseases. We're based in Stockholm, in Sweden. We sit here on the campus of the Karolinska Institute, where also the research once originated. And we're listed since 5 years now, listed on the Nasdaq First North Growth Market in Stockholm. Our market cap is about 750 million. Earlier this year, we raised quite a bit of money, more than 500 million in a rights issue that also strengthened the shareholder base. So our current top shareholders are Link, which is the investment company of Bengt Jolander, a fairly famous Swedish life science investor. We have the Swiss life science specialist fund, HBM. We have the 4th national pension fund in Sweden. And we have Handelsbanken funds, Swedish-based commercial bank. Together, they account for about 40% of the capital and votes of the company. But in addition, we have more than 5,000 shareholders. So these are just the top 4. So let me see if I can change slide again. Yes. So ulcerative colitis, it's a debilitating disease. These patients still need new drugs to help them. The disease is caused by a chronic inflammation of the colon. So this is the large intestine, the rectum and the colon. And it comes in flares. So the inflammation flares up. And then you suffer from the typical symptoms of blood and mucus mixed diarrhea. These patients, typically they're in pain, stomach pain, they get tired, they lose quite a bit of blood, so they get anemia. And you can also have manifestations of the disease outside of the stomach in inflammation in the eyes, joint pain, and such. So it's a very difficult disease. Affects your life a lot. And then in between those flares, when you're in inactive period or in remission, they can live fairly normal lives. But it has a significant negative impact on the quality of life of these patients, because they're always waiting for that next flare. Typically it starts, you get the symptoms between 20 and 30 years of age, 15, 30 somewhere. That's the peak. But then you have the disease for the rest of your life. There is no cure for this disease. So this is a sensitive age. I mean, you form a family, you get your first job or your studies. So it really affects these patients in their quality of life a lot. And there are a number of therapies available for these patients, but particularly for the more difficult cases where we work in the moderate to severe ulcerative colitis, they have limited efficacy and they can cause severe side effects. So we have a quote here from Felicia, 23-year-old girl, who really highlights the difficulty of not knowing when this hits next time. You also have a little depiction of the colon there, where the part that is red, the last third of the colon, is what we call the left side of the colon, because on the left side of the body. And this is the particular area of the colon where we focus. So you can divide the disease by disease extent, left-sided disease, more extensive disease, or pancolitis. But we also divide the disease by severity. We have mild cases, moderate, and severe cases. So the current treatment paradigm is that you start with aminosalicylates, which are old tried drugs from the 50s. But most patients then need a bit of steroids to help them get out of a flare, and that's really the standard treatment. But a significant share of patients don't respond to these first and second line treatments, and you have to apply a third line treatment where you have quite a few options these days, and there's also where most of the development activity is in this disease, and it's also where the money is. So today we have several classes of biologics. We have JAK inhibitors and immunomodulators, old immunomodulators, and there are several products here that sell for more than $1 billion a year in ulcerative colitis alone, in this third line. They're fairly high priced, $30,000 to $80,000 in the US, of course, as always, cheaper in the EU. But as I mentioned, they don't help that many patients, and they are associated with increased risks of, for example, serious infections and cancer, because basically they push down the immune system to get rid of the inflammation. If you can't control the disease with drugs, then colectomy is the end station for these patients, where you surgically remove the whole colon, which is, of course, a big undertaking, and it doesn't really solve all the problems. So this is where we come in with Cobitolimod as a potential new drug for treating patients with moderate to severe ulcerative colitis in the first instance. And we have presented positive phase 2b data, and I'll mention in a minute the drug development process. But we had a positive phase 2b study not so long ago, and before that we've actually done 4 completed clinical studies that also support the efficacy and safety that we saw in the phase 2b study. So based on this, we're now advancing into phase 3. And what we can offer, the features of this product, is that we have a competitive efficacy to what's out there and what's in development, with a superior safety profile. So we've had a completely clean safety profile so far, which is very important for these patients, because it's a chronic disease with a chronic treatment. So you have a picture of the product there. It's we give this locally via the rectum, so it's a 50 milliliter solution in a bottle like that, and you give it from behind every 3rd week. So it's an infrequent dosing. So about once per month we give it. Importantly also is that we have a novel mechanism of action. That means we have a new way of addressing the disease biologically, which is important from a competitive standpoint. And this good safety profile and the unique mechanism of action makes this a good candidate for combination therapy. So you can use it alone, but there's also more and more talk that for the very difficult cases, maybe you need to try 2 drugs in combination, and then you want at least one of them to be safe. So this is where Cobitolimod has a natural advantage as well. So all in all, we see that the product has a significant commercial potential. We estimate that a successful commercial launch, commercialization, we could sell for more than $1 billion per year in ulcerative colitis alone, given this outstanding combination of efficacy and safety.
Peter, could I stop you there and just ask you from sort of a background point of view? You mentioned Karolinska Institute to come up with the idea to make a product like this. What and you mentioned this technology platform DIMS. So it's just to better understand what made you go along to try and develop these products.
Yeah, so the company was founded quite a while back here at the Karolinska Institute. So there were 2 professors, one immunologist and one gastroenterologist, who had these patients who came up with the concept and tried it in a small study here at the Karolinska Institute, and saw nice results. And this was back in 2000, year 2000. And then there was a company founded around this, and the development has been going along. And along the way, we started building more DIMS like this, and built a portfolio around this concept of using this particular mechanism of action to address inflammation in a wide variety of diseases. So that's a bit on the history. So as I said, we see a large commercial potential for this. The total addressable market in this first part of the ulcerative colitis population is estimated to more than $9 billion in a yearly market. So we have a bit more than 2 million patients in the US, Europe, well, the 5 largest markets in Europe, and Japan. And about 60% of those have this more difficult form, moderate to severe ulcerative colitis. And of those, a bit more than half have this left-sided disease that we can reach with our current rectal mode of administration. And of those, a bit more than half actually fail the conventional therapy, meaning we have about 400,000 patients that could be candidates for a treatment like this. And if we assume a price in line with the more recently launched products in this disease, 35,000 in the US, 10,000 in Europe, we get to more than $9 billion in an addressable market. Of course, we won't take all of this. Not all patients are treated. There are also other products, but we still estimate that we can reach sales of more than $1 billion per year in this indication alone. And we've come a long way. So as I mentioned, the company was actually started in the year 2000. And if you look at the drug development process, we've passed the most risky steps on the way. Typically, you start with thousands of product candidates in a discovery phase, and then you narrow it down as you move through what we call preclinical, where you test it in model systems and animals and stuff. And then you get into people in phase 1. And out of 5 to 10, I think it's actually maybe more now, 1 in 10 that actually starts phase 1 that actually makes it to market because they don't work, or they turn out to be dangerous, and the drug candidates drop off along the way. And we've come all the way to phase 3, which is the last stage before you can then apply for marketing approval. So it's we've come a long way. It's an advanced stage of development. So the last stage before you can apply for marketing approval. So it's been de-risked along the way. We discussed maybe a little bit of how this works. So when you have ulcerative colitis, there is an imbalance in the immune system in the colon. So you have too much of inflammation, too many inflammatory cells, and too little of anti-inflammatory regulatory cells that can calm the immune system down. And this is what Cobitolimod does. We have shown scientifically, and it's been published, to have the reference here, that we can decrease the number of inflammatory cells and increase the number of anti-inflammatory cells, restoring the natural balance that you should have in your immune system in the colon. So we really balance the immune system via this toll-like receptor 9, which is our mechanism of action, TLR9. And this is something that they then discovered at the beginning of time here, that this could be a way of addressing inflammation. And we are now first in class, the only one with this mechanism of action in this disease, developing in this disease. The phase 2b data was published end of last year in a very prestigious medical journal called The Lancet Gastroenterology and Hepatology. It's one of the highest ranked scientific journals in this field. The data was also presented at the big medical conferences by our principal investigator from Germany, Professor Raja Atreya. So it was very well received. We also had a special mentioning in the Lancet from an independent group of experts stating that this looks very promising. And the results we showed were competitive to what's out there in the market. So this is a busy slide. I will take some time to explain. The upper part shows the currently marketed products. So these are products that the patients can use today. The blue bars show how large share of the patients who received the active drug in their phase 3 studies that became symptom-free or went into remission. And the orange bars shows how many or how big share of patients that received placebo, an inactive substance, a control group, that went into remission or became symptom-free. And as you can see here, the blue bars are very similar. I mean, they're all between 16 and 18% somewhere, which means that 16 to 18% of the patients became symptom-free receiving these active drugs, meaning more than 80% did not become symptom-free. And that really highlights the need for new medicines in this indication and new mechanisms of action, new ways of addressing the disease. And on the far right, you have the Cobitolimod data from phase 2, where we actually had comparable or maybe even slightly better effect than the currently marketed product. In the lower half of this, you have the drug candidates that are currently in phase 3 or have reported phase 3 data and are waiting for approval. Again, Cobitolimod has a competitive efficacy compared to these. So we are quite confident that we can make a mark here. There are a number of products here already on the market, and there are more in development, as you see, because this has attracted the interest of a lot of companies because there is such a large commercial potential. So you have a number of big pharmas in there, like Pfizer, J&J, AbbVie, all scrambling to get a share of this market. But all of these drugs or classes of drugs, we've also listed the classes here. TNF-alphas are the best-selling drugs. There are several billion-dollar drugs in there, like Humira, the most best-selling drug in the world. You also have Debilitating from Takeda, which sells for more than $1 billion a year here. So really big commercial successes, but they're all associated with severe side effects. Because all of them kind of push down the immune system. They're immunosuppressive. And when you don't have your normal immune system going, you typically suffer from increased risk of infections, and can be very severe infections, and also an increased risk of cancer or malignancies. So all of them have those risks. But then they're also have their own special versions of it, and the safety profile of these have come into the focus recently, because the FDA did a large safety review of one of the more recent entries, the JAK inhibitors. And as you can see, they have a terrible long list of potential side effects. They can cause, well, death is only one of them, but also embolisms and heart problems. And the FDA firmly said that this is very dangerous. It should only be used when you've tried everything else. And still, the big pharmas are developing these drugs for this indication. So it tells you, again, the medical need, that companies and doctors are willing to take these risks with these patients to get a response. But this is where we really stand out with a completely superior safety profile. We've shown an excellent safety profile in all our clinical studies without any increased risk compared to placebo. So we have a very significant advantage there. And with this data, we went to both the American regulators, FDA, and the European regulator, EMA, to ask for their advice, and both of them support that we now move into phase 3. We have also established advisory boards with the very top researchers, top experts from the US in the North American Advisory Board, and also a European Advisory Board with the top European names that provide advice, but also act as our ambassadors in the medical community. And we've done a lot of primary market research, meaning we've gone out and asked patient, doctors, and payers, like insurance companies and health authorities, about this product, and we have a very positive feedback from all these stakeholders. So we're very confident now, moving into phase 3, that there is a large appetite and a large willingness to pay for a drug like this. So we're now starting phase 3. We call it Conclude, the phase 3 study. The study design is based on the successful phase 2b study, in the sense that it's the same patient population. We give the treatment the same way. We have the same way of measuring the effect. So to copy as much as possible, or change as little as possible from the successful phase 2b study. We are trying 2 different doses. So the best dose from the phase 2b, which was 250 milligrams. But here we're also evaluating 500 milligrams, so twice the dose, that could increase the efficacy further. And we will do an interim analysis after about a third of the trial to see which one of those 2 doses is the best, and then move forward with that. So this is a global study. We will be at a couple of 100 clinics in more than 30 countries. We're looking to include 440 subjects in the first study we're doing. And that's quite a project. So we've hired a leading global CRO, contract research organization, that helps companies to do clinical trials. They're called Parexel. And we have an agreement for services with them to actually do the study with us. And we are now approved to start the study in several countries, including the US. First out was Sweden this summer, and then we had the US, And more recently, we've added Hungary, and we see a number of countries that are very close now to approving the study. So we are ready to initiate the patient recruitment. We have started to activate sites, meaning everything is in place, the systems, the drug, the contracts, all the approvals. So we will allow sites now to actually include patients in the study. And then we expect that it takes 18 to 24 months to complete this first induction study with 440 patients. And we have secured the financing for this study through the rights issue earlier this year, which was oversubscribed. And also, as I mentioned, we got in a number of new, very strong shareholders. So we have the money to see us through this first study. This study is part of a program. So after this study, the patients that do respond to the drug will continue in what we call a maintenance study, where we continue to give them drug every 3 weeks to see if we can prevent future flares, to prevent that they actually relapse. We're also planning a second induction study following this. So typically the regulators wants to see 2 independent studies confirming that you have an effect. So also in the plan is a second induction study, but before we start that, we will be able to read this first study out so we can optimize the rest of the rest of the program based on those results. But we should know that we don't have the financing for that second part of the program, but for the first part till the next data point, we do have the money. So all of this is in moderate to severe left-sided ulcerative colitis, but we are confident that this drug would also work in other forms of inflammatory bowel disease, and we also have data on that. So we have moderate to severe disease that is more spread in the colon, so all moderate to severe. We have milder patients. We're now starting with the moderate to severe because you can get a good pricing there. And we also have data there. You have proctitis, and eventually you have Crohn's disease. Crohn's disease is a sister disease to ulcerative colitis, but it can happen also outside of the colon. So you can have it anywhere between the mouth and the rectum. And to be able to reach those sites of inflammation, we are developing an oral version of Cobitolimod. So it would be a capsule or a pill that you take, and then it survives the stomach and then starts delivering the drug when it gets to the end of the small intestine. So you could also reach parts of the gastrointestinal tract that we cannot reach with the current formulation. So that's also in development, and that would, more than double the market potential for this drug candidate. As I mentioned, we'd also have a broad portfolio of other chemically similar substances that we call DIMS. I have more than 150 of them. They are all chemically similar in the sense that they're small pieces of DNA that we can use to modulate the immune system, but they have some separate characteristics that make them appropriate for other immunological diseases. So the concept of this TLR9 agonism is now validated by Cobitolimod, and we've selected a small number of other DIMS candidates that we are testing in models of other inflammatory diseases outside of ulcerative colitis and inflammatory bowel disease, where we have seen positive signals, and we're now following that up to confirm the results to be able to select a drug candidate that we can take forward. And in this, we can leverage our experience and expertise that we've built from the development of Cobitolimod. And we also have some financial support for this from the Swedish innovation agency Vinnova, where we've received in 2 parts about 4 million Swedish crowns to finance this development. So in summary, if we focus on Cobitolimod then as an investment opportunity, this disease causes major suffering and social and economic costs. There is an enduring unmet medical need for new drugs. This medical need means there is a large commercial opportunity. We see there is blockbuster potential here for Cobitolimod. given the outstanding combination of efficacy and safety, and also the novel mechanism of action. And we're now advancing into phase 3, which is the last stage before you can apply for marketing approval. We're ready to initiate patient recruitment. We're starting to activate sites, and we have the money to see us through the next pivotal readout of clinical data. So that's what I had prepared, maybe a bit longer than expected, but
it's perfectly okay, Peter. Thank you very much for this very deep introduction. It's very interesting, but I think we do have time for a couple of questions. And the first one is going back to the slides, the slide illustrating the remission levels of your product compared to current products in the market and pipeline projects. So I'm just I can perfectly see that from relative to current treatments and current products in the market, you are above. You have a remission levels above this. Is this you mentioned that you're trying higher doses for the medicine, and it's just what could we expect, because 20% is above the current products, but in line with pipeline projects. It's just to better understand what's the potential for higher doses, and will that be which doses have you decided on in the phase 3 conclusion?
So in the phase 3, we're trying the 250 milligram dose, which provided the efficacy you can see in this picture on the far right. So that's 250 milligrams. And now we're testing 500 as well. So twice that dose. And I cannot speculate in how good that is. And I mean, have we reached a plateau in the dose response curve? As soon as you go up in dose, you always increase the risk for safety signals. We haven't seen anything so far, but of course, a higher dose has a higher risk than a lower dose. That's a standard in this indication. So we will make the selection based on both efficacy or the effect and the safety or potential safety risks that come with the dose once we get to that point. But I really want to stress that with the 20% effect here, or a bit more, I mean, if you're just in line with the currently approved products that we know are dangerous, I mean, it's a simple choice for a doctor or for a patient. I mean, would you rather have something which is equally effective but safe, or would you take the risk of gambling with the safety risks that are associated with the currently approved? So this is where I think the decision from the FDA to say that, well, you cannot try a JAK inhibitor until you've tried everything else. So if we look at the lower part of the graph, you have upadacitinib, which is the one that has shown the best efficacy so far in phase 3, with a quite impressive 30% here. But you're not allowed to try that until you've tried a JAK inhibitor, an integrin inhibitor, an IL-23 inhibitor, an S1P receptor modulator, and maybe eventually a TL9 agonist. So you cannot only look at efficacy here, which I think is many times we have to point that out, that efficacy is not everything there is. So we want to position Cobitolimod as the first option in the third line. So before you try any of those more dangerous things, you should try the safest thing. Then if that doesn't work, fine, then you can try a JAK inhibitor. So that's really the positioning.
Yeah, I do understand the logic. I was just trying to get a sense of this level of remission. What is a satisfactory level? Because even though it's better, it's still as you say, almost 80% that is not reacting.
Exactly, which means there will be room for several products here, because the patients rotate between the different mechanisms and products.
Yes, and so in your dialogue with FDA, have they decided on which have you decided on which dose to go with? When will you decide on that, or will there come two parallel programs, or how should we understand?
No, so both of these drugs are now, both of these doses are now part of the first phase 3 study, together with placebo. And when we have data from about a third of the patients, we have an independent data monitoring committee who will look at the data and select which dose is most appropriate, looking at both the effect and the safety. And then, of course, 500 will have to provide something more than 250, given the potential increased safety risk. And I mean, it costs more to make, and I mean there are a number of advantages of the 250 milligram dose if they're comparable.
It's certainly not a convenient way to get delivery of this product, but I know that you have had studies or have tried to develop all administrative products a couple of years ago. What's the status on that?
Yeah, so first of all, let me remind you that this is a rectal disease. These patients are very occupied with their rectum and their colon. So they are used to taking rectally administered drugs, and actually they take them every day. These aminosalicylates and steroids. The advice or the current guideline is that that's your starting point. So more than 90% of these patients have actually had a rectal treatment in their disease journey. They're used to being probed from behind every so often with cameras and investigations. And our drug is only given once every third week, so about once per month. So not every day. I mean, this is once per month. And if you look at the currently approved drugs, several of those are actually intravenous infusions. So you have to go to a hospital or a clinic at least and sit with a syringe, a drip for a couple of hours. So it's injected straight into your blood. So I mean, the alternatives are not that easy here either. And we've done market research with patients and doctors on the acceptability of a rectal mode of administration here, and the patients are crystal clear. I mean, if this works, we'll use it. But that gets me still an oral formulation would, one, provide patient convenience, absolutely, or additional patient convenience, but maybe more importantly, it would let us reach other parts of the gastrointestinal tract that we cannot reach with the rectal mode of administration. For example, in more extensive ulcerative colitis or in Crohn's disease. So this is where we have built a prototype of an oral formulation a few years back, but at that point we worked with a lower dose. So with the phase 2b and now in the phase 3, we've increased the dose quite a bit. So we have to do additional development work there now to add, to be able to add more substance in this oral. But I mean, we have shown before that it can be done, or that we could get to a certain dose, and now we looking to see how we can increase that further.
Yeah, you mentioned.
So that will be done in parallel with the phase 3 development.
Yeah, you mentioned the big market opportunities, and is this an illustration of the increased potential? Because I know a couple of years ago, the market potential was estimated to be around $5 billion, and now it's grown to 9 billion. So it's just is that the increased number of indications, or how should we interpret it?
No, so the 9 billion is more of a theoretically addressable market. If all patients were on drugs, then it would be 9 billion. The actual sales for the biologics in this indication today is 5 billion.
Okay.
So obviously not all patients even have a doctor, and not all patients that have a doctor gets the best treatment for cost reasons or whatever. So we see that the actual market gets closer and closer to the addressable market, in the sense that care advances. Healthcare gets better and better. But we also see the market driven by these new entrants, that there are more alternatives, and so the whole market is growing. And it's fairly stable, the number of cases in Europe and the US. It's growing, or in Western Europe and the US, it's growing with the population, more or less. But in emerging markets, this is an increasing problem. It's growing fast in Eastern Europe, in China, in other parts of Asia, because it's related to economic growth. So the richer the country is, the more of these autoimmune diseases you get. And ulcerative colitis is a perfect example of that, where we see new emerging markets getting more and more problems with this disease.
Peter, time is running, but just a few more questions. If we go back 2 slides, I think the central line is the second last, likely to prescribe to a significant proportion of their patients. That is sort of the whole idea, or the hope for you as a company. But how likely? What do you mean by likely? Is there a culture or custom in handling these sort of diseases that makes doctors very reluctant to try new products, or how should we interpret this?
So we went out and asked doctors, a lot of them, in the US and in selected European markets, and asked them, okay, if this was a product, how big share of your patients would you try this in? And they said, well, I would give it to 60% of my patients in both the US and in Europe. And this was done by an expert consultancy firm, and their experience is that doctors are always overly optimistic when you ask them like that, so you have to haircut that estimate. But maybe by 50% is a typical haircut. So the reality usually turns out to be about half of what the doctor said, but that's still a lot of patients. I can imagine. So that's where this the statement comes from.
Yes, okay. And we will, of course, follow that as you move along in your phase 3 study. Just to clarify it, so when can we expect news flow on the phase 3 study? When is the first time we can expect something?
Yeah, so we're now activating the sites so they can include patients. We've seen that COVID, the pandemic, has made it difficult for clinics to prioritize new studies. So it's been a bit slower than normal to get started, and the clinics are a bit hesitant because they don't have really the resources to put into to clinical studies. But now we see it's easing up, so we can get them started, and then the next big milestone would be when we have the first patient in that really have randomized the patient or put the patient in the study. So we now have a couple of countries, and we will add more countries. So it should happen soon. I can't put a more specific time on that now, but so the site, we have open sites, we're opening more sites, but then these sites need to have a patient as well. And we have the recruitment rate. I mean, we have a couple of 100 clinics to find 440 patients in a year and a half to 2 years. So on average, you get about 1 patient per clinic a year. So it's not like a big stream of patients in each clinic. Okay. So we need quite a few clinics before we get that big flow. So in the beginning, it will be slow, and we know that it's always like that in this indication. But then when you get enough clinics up and running, and you get the big countries, because the countries we now have won't really fill the study. I mean, you need Poland and Russia, Ukraine, big countries in Eastern Europe are typically the best contributors of patients for these kind of studies. So
okay,
it will start slow, but then it will accelerate.
Okay, Peter, that's very interesting. We will certainly be looking forward to see those results as we move along. Very interesting. Thank you so much for the presentations, and we will be speaking to you later. Thank you so much, Peter Sahome, CEO
Thank you, Henrik.
of Pharmaceuticals. Thank you.
Thanks to the audience. Thanks for listening.